Breaking news this morning, economic news, brand new jobs numbers just out. You can see them behind me. In July, the U.S. added just 73,000 new jobs, below expectations, the unemployment rate at 4.2%. But the big news, really big news, major revisions for May and June, major downward revisions. Those months much, much worse than thought, really making them two of the weakest months since the pandemic. Let's get right to CNN's Zain Asher for the latest on this. What are you seeing, Zain?
John, I don't know what to say. I mean, this number is bad. You mentioned the downward revisions, but if you look at this number, 73,000 jobs added compared to 115,000 that was expected. And you have to remember that in order for us not to be in the danger zone in this economy, the economy should be chugging along at least 100,000 jobs every month. The fact that this is below that is significant. You have to go back to October last year to find a worse number. As you mentioned, the downward revisions are really problematic. We're talking about June being 14,000 instead of 147,000.
That's a huge discrepancy.
That is huge. And then you think about May coming in at 19,000. And a lot of the economists that I've been speaking to have been warning me that, look, when you start laying off the people whose very job it is to actually collect the data, that is likely at some point going to show up in the numbers. And the discrepancies is really what concerns me. I do want to talk about some of the specific sectors. I'll start with some of the positive numbers that we got. As we've spoken about time and time again, a lot of the jobs growth has been driven by healthcare, right? This is a care economy. You have an aging population. That seems to be doing relatively fine. Part of the problem, and what I find really problematic, and I'm waiting for Trump to post on Truth Social about these numbers, and wondering what he's going to say about Jerome Powell and the Fed needing to cut rates. But when you think about manufacturing is the one sector that the Trump administration has said that they want to help. That this whole sort of tariff game is about helping that sector. That sector is losing jobs by the minute. When you think about the fact that factories are not able to import raw materials, that you have factories in this country that are sitting idle, that factories are laying people off, and you have at least 11,000 jobs being lost in manufacturing, that's a problem. Construction is another sector. That's sort of, 2,000 jobs added. I mean, that's sort of relatively lukewarm here. You're not seeing much movement in construction. That's a sector that is definitely dependent on immigration. And when you have the fact that a lot of people in this country who are immigrants or from elsewhere are scared to show up to building sites, that's also a problem as well. We're seeing wages in construction actually soar and activity go down as well. Retail as a sector was okay, added about 15,000 jobs, sort of chugging along. Retail has obviously been problematic because of a little-known company known as Amazon, but also retail is heavily dependent on tariffs as well. I'm really curious about what Jerome Powell is going to say, not just because of the headline number, because it's not really just about the headline number, as you know, John. It is really about, A, what is beneath the hood, but also these downward revisions, which tell you that when I came on here last month telling you, the economy is resilient, that wasn't actually the case because of these downward revisions.
If we can get that other board up, because that's the one that actually tells the story. When you see job growth from month to month of 14,000, 19,000, and then in the 70s, hopefully that can come back up, because that's the news here. You've got three anemic months of jobs growth. Put that side by side with this new announcement that came overnight of these tariffs, which may or may not go into effect. See, right here, this is the news.
This is
you
the
look
news.
at this. These are, and I'll just walk around. These are two of the weakest months we've seen since 2020. 14,000, 19,000. Those are very, very weak numbers. And it's also just statistically, and for those who keep track of things, way off from what they said before. But if you looked at a 3-month stretch like this, you'd say, wait a second, we've got an economy that's got some real challenges.
That's got a lot of work to do. And when you think about the fact that Liberation Day, April 2nd rather, Liberation Day, we were sort of wondering when we were going to see the effects of these tariffs on the labor market. And you and I were talking about the fact that, wow, we haven't actually seen it yet. Well, we did see it. It just wasn't reflected in the numbers. 19,000, as you point out, 14,000 jobs added in June. Clearly, it was having an impact. People were not hiring. You had so much uncertainty in this economy where employers just didn't feel comfortable actually hiring. And I'm wondering what Jerome Powell is actually going to do. He talked about just this idea of being data dependent. And now we're seeing the data really showing some kind of indication that these tariffs are absolutely having an effect now. And so a lot of people are saying that the September rate cut was already likely. It is now even more likely, John.
Zain Asher, thank you very much.
Of course.
Kate?
Thank you so much. Joining us right now for more on this from the White House is Stephen Miron, the chair of the President's Council of Economic Advisors. Stephen, thank you so much for being here. What's your reaction to this jobs report?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Look, this jobs report isn't ideal. There's no way around that. But nevertheless, I think that the downward revisions reflect a couple of anomalous factors. First of all, about 60% of the downward revision is due to quirks of the seasonal adjustment process. Then on top of that, there's the fact that the president created in a household survey since the president took office, he created about 2.5 million jobs for Americans, whereas we've eliminated about 1 million jobs for foreign-born workers. That's a result of our strong immigration policy, of our strong border policy, keeping America safe, and eventually the outflow of foreign workers in this data were bound to show up in the establishment survey, as they finally did this morning too. Finally, we've been hearing a lot about uncertainty over the last few months, but that's all resolved now. We're creating trade deals left and right that have unlocked enormous new potential for the American economy. The tariff uncertainty is fading away. Tariff rates are settling in. The One Big Beautiful Bill is now law. There's no more uncertainty over the tax bill either, over potentially the biggest tax hike in American history. And on top of that, there are such strong, powerful incentives in the One Big Beautiful Bill for investment. Things like full expensing on investment in equipment, in R&D, on new factory structures. These are huge. So it's all going to get much, much better from here.
But on those major downward revisions for June and May, I mean, June was initially said to be 147,000 jobs added, now revised to be just 14,000 jobs added. That amounts to the weakest month of job growth since December of 2020. And you attribute that to what, if it is not in part because of the uncertainty created in part by the president's trade war?
Oh, I attribute it to the combination of the three things that I described before. About 40% of that is due to seasonal adjustment quirks around teachers. Some of it is due to declining foreign-born employment, even as we created more American-born employment, and that is going to net out in a way that you see ultimately reflected in the data like that. And then finally, there's the uncertainty, right? Don't forget, we were in the midst of restructuring the global trading system in a way that hasn't been done in decades. The president is standing up for American workers and American firms for the first time in decades, and of course that was going to induce some uncertainty. It induced some volatility in financial markets, and we can see it induces some volatility in economic data too. But that uncertainty is resolved. The tariff rates are set. The One Big Beautiful Bill is law. It's going to get better from here.
Congressman Stephen Lynch, a Democrat from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us. Major downward revisions for May and June, making them the worst months since the pandemic. A miss on the jobs report just out. I want you to listen how the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors at the White House, Steve Miron, just described it to our Kate Baldwin.
This jobs report isn't ideal. There's no way around that. But nevertheless, I think that the downward revisions reflect a couple of anomalous factors.
Not ideal. How would you describe it?
Well, we're seeing in our area, we've got 30% unemployment among the ironworkers union. A lot of those building trades are being affected by the 50% tariffs against Canadian steel, where we get most of our fabricated steel from, aluminum as well. So in the building trades, we're seeing, they're probably the tip of the iceberg, but they're the first, I think, to be impacted. And I think that the impact will continue to grow from there. It's not an anomaly. This is the beginning of a bad sequence for employment in the country.
Actually, 11,000 manufacturing jobs lost last month in those reports. You are deeply connected to the unions up in Massachusetts, South Boston, and elsewhere. What has the impact been of the president's tariffs to this point on manufacturing, and what do you think it will be now that he is announcing a new round of tariffs that he says will go into effect in a week?
So I've got about 6 major projects that have already gone through the environmental process, the community process, the zoning process. But those develop, and these are large-scale projects. These are all hundreds of thousands of square feet, lots of retail, residential units, some manufacturing. All those projects are stopped because of the uncertainty. How can you put a bid in, or how can a developer get financing when the cost of your products, whether it's steel or concrete or aggregate or lumber, which is also historically high right now, around 20% lumber from Canada, how can you give a bid to an owner when you don't know what your costs are going to be? Your margins can disappear like that, and so we're seeing the banks also very reluctant to offer financing on favorable terms because of the uncertainty.